Hi, everybody. Welcome to this best practices session focused on storage as a service. I'm here today once again with Benjamin Henry, Field CTO at Komprise. And in this series, we've been talking a lot about reporting, cost models. We've talked a lot about analytics. But today, we're going to dive into the power of deep analytics. So, Ben, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. We're going to talk about time-based actions versus query-based actions, get broad strokes versus being surgical with our data, filters, and tagging. All right, so with that, let me dive into the actual demo. All right, so here again, we're going to start with the data donut. On the left-hand side, I have my plan editor. I'm going to click on edit, and I'm going to first talk about those broad strokes, a time-based policy. For some organizations, it's pretty easy to say, you know what? I would like to tier or archive all of my data that hasn't been accessed in 1 year or more. So you set the time-based policy, 1 year, good to go. Other organizations, well, I can't quite be that broad. I need to be more surgical. Fantastic. That's where the deep analytics query comes in. All right, but how do I build that deep analytics query and select it here? Perfect. Glad you asked. We're going to switch tabs and we're going to go over to deep analytics. In here, this is my basic screen where I've got a lot of information that I can pick and choose from. I've got my filters on the left. I've got my all queries and my new query over here. Well, again, you saw a drop down in my plan tab. This is where that drop down comes from, all my queries. That's great, but I need to build one. Perfect. I'm going to say new query. I'm going to say save, and I'm going to call this NA for NetApp, and I'm going to call it NA text files. All right, perfect. I'm going to hit save, and I also have the option to make it public or private. And this means, is it visible to everyone who's a DA user, or is it visible to just me? I'm going to make this one public. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now I'm going to open up the filters. This is the real power of deep analytics, is all of these filters. I'm going to start with my data stores because I said I was going to make this specific to NetApp. So I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to choose this NetApp cluster. Within the cluster, I've got 2 SVMs. I can continue to be even more surgical if I want to by continuing to drill down in this data store explorer. And I can say, okay, in SVM1, I only want to look at this one NFS export, but that's perfect. I want to go even deeper. Excellent. Keep clicking and you'll keep drilling down into more and more folder structures. You can be as precise as you want, or you can be as broad as you want. In this case, I want to search the entire SVM. And actually, I'm going to go up and use the entire cluster in this situation. Then I'm going to apply a specific filter for an extension. Text files. I'm going to hit add, and I'm going to go ahead and click run. So now this is showing me all text files that are a part of that entire NetApp cluster. I can continue to be even more surgical by adding in file names, last modified, last access, file types. File types are categories. In here are the most common file extensions for those categories, and this is customizable to your organization. I can talk about file sizes, greater than, less than, equal to. I can talk about owners. One thing I forgot to mention too is there's the include versus exclude. By default, it's always include this filter. You can also say, hey, you know what, exclude file types of log files. So you get the option of include or exclude. All right, so now let's go back to this filter where I said, okay, all the text files in this NetApp cluster. Great, I'm going to save this query. All right, so now that's in my all queries. I could simply go back to my plan, choose the dropdown, choose my query, and activate that plan and start tiering and archiving everything in that NetApp environment that has an extension of text file. All right, now we're going to take this even further. And let's say I want to tag data, because tag, if you saw, that was one of the options that I could choose from to filter my data is based on Komprise tags. All right, so let's go back here. Let's say I want to also apply a tag to this environment. Well, why would I want to tag? Well, a great example is whether your data is restricted. Well, what do you mean by restricted? Well, what if the data contains PII? It's sensitive and you're saying, I don't want to tier or archive this. So great, let's go ahead and tag this with something called restricted, and we're gonna give it a value of why is it restricted? And press enter, and now this becomes available to me. I'm gonna say PII. So it's restricted, and I'm gonna give it a value of why, PII. Go ahead and put that in here, and all I have to do is hit add tag, and then I'll tag all the data that I have selected based on that query that I created. Okay, that's great, but you're gonna ask me another question. You know what? I'm responsible for hosting the data. My end users know whether the data has PII or not. Fantastic. Empower them them to make their decisions. Everything I just did in DA, you can actually assign that to a group of users. You can assign it to an individual user. You can assign it to data stewards that may know what's inside the data on behalf of those end users. So here for my users tab, I'm going to take this existing user. I'm going to edit this user, and I'm going to choose the deep analytics role. And I can either say access to all the deep analytics data, or I can choose restricted. And what do I mean by restricted? Well, let's click next. In here, I can choose whether Paul's going to have access to the entire environment, meaning all the sites, all the servers, all the SVMs, all the data, or I can say just one site, or I can say down to the SVM, and I can keep going down to the individual shares and exports. So in this case, I'm going to say, you know what, Paul, I'm going to give you access to this entire SVM, and I'm going to go ahead and click save. So with that, Darren, I'll turn it back over to you.
Fantastic. Good overview of deep analytics. There's a lot of power here, as you said, to get much more surgical with your data. And in our next session, we're going to come back to tiering and archiving and some different use cases. But hopefully this is useful to everyone, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.